I will go no further, said Enrique, as the downpour drowned out his voice. No further, sir. Pardon? Lapérouse snapped back. Enrique gulped nervously, regretful for leading them this far perhaps. He told them over and over that the terrain was sacred and that white men were forbidden. But the keen explorers had marched on regardless. We are here, gentlemen, he mumbled in his strong Caribbean Spanish. Lapérouse sighed impatiently, weighed down by his rain-soaked clothes. Dagelet, he snarled, giving his comrade a long look. What did the Negro say? Joseph Dagelet was lost in a daydream. The astronomer couldn't help but ponder the reaction in Paris should they discover the Fountain of Youth. He deemed it poetic that such a wonder would be found in Hispaniola, the first island in the New World to be settled by Columbus. By now, the whole kingdom of France must have presumed that the great Lapérouse was dead. 3 years ago, they'd shipwrecked in the South Pacific, and the two of them had been to hell and back since. Yet the bullish Commodore had insisted on keeping their new mission a secret, and Joseph had eventually abided breaking contact with home, for it would only make their grand return twice as special. Trekking through the tropical mountains had driven him half mad, but Lapérouse remained very much alive, and he'd grown grumpier with each passing day. The highland air was thin and muggy, so every breath felt too short, draining their entire lungs and dizzying their minds. The summer storms had moistened the topsoil, making each stride through the muddy slime heavier than the last, and Lapérouse's leather boots were now laden with a thick coat of brown sludge. Naval officers belonged at sea, not a god-forsaken forest, he thought. Joseph Dagelet, however, was merely happy to explore a new corner of the world, and he'd lost count of all the bright and beautiful flora he'd seen. "Dagelet!" barked the naval officer. "What did he say, damn it?" Joseph's eyes jerked away from a brilliantly bizarre flower, budding red-orange petals in the shape of a pine cone. Then he glanced at the endless sea of trees in each direction, searching for anything resembling a fountain. Nothing but a dark green blur surrounded the three men, so he dared not translate Enrique's words too soon. Instead, he pulled a sopping map from his wet pocket and studied it carefully. But of course, the ink was smudged and the topography impossible to read. "I believe we're still on the Spanish side of the island," Joseph said loudly, as raindrops hammered the leaves by his ears. "The border with Saint-Domingue is a few leagues to the west." "I didn't ask you where we were," whined Lapérouse. "I asked you what the darn Negro said. He's supposed to take us all the way, so where the hell is it?" Joseph turned to their guide and politely asked, "Where is the opening, my friend?" "We are here," Enrique claimed once more, but this time he gestured with his torch. "What you seek is below." His eyes glanced towards a small hole in the ground, half veiled by a patch of soggy undergrowth. The cave opening was hidden between a couple of thick bristly bushes, its visibility unaided by the misty spray of the raging monsoon. Joseph beamed when he saw it. Enrique's torch was remarkably durable under the relentless rain, and he took the flame towards the hole to make it clearer in the dusk gloom. "What you seek is below." "What's he saying, damn it?" Lapérouse spat. "We're here," Joseph replied. "Look." Lapérouse's eyes widened as he saw the hole. "Voilà." "Muchos gracias, Enrique," Joseph said warmly. Enrique was a timid young man of middling height, draped in tattered rags and old rosary beads, with smooth skin as dark as the midnight sky. They'd stumbled across him in the rainforest, and luckily Joseph was just able to grasp his heavy accent. Presumably he was a runaway, but he hadn't revealed much during the journey. Yet, he diligently guided the Frenchmen to their destination, and due to their now unreadable map, Joseph deeply appreciated his help. "Payment," Enrique muttered shyly in his island accent. No translation was needed. Lapérouse had heard the gripes of Spanish sailors enough times to understand the request. "Of course," he replied, giving the black man a sinister grin. "Let us see what I have in my purse, amigo." Stepping towards Lapérouse was Enrique's mistake. If he had kept his distance, Joseph might have been able to react fast enough to save his life, but in one swift move, Lapérouse drew a dagger from his belt and plunged it into Enrique's heart. He whimpered his last breath with a look of confusion and fell face down on the squelchy mud. Lapérouse! Joseph yelled in anger. What are you doing? No one else must know of our discovery. But how will we find our way back? The killer's blistered lips curled into a smirk. There's no turning back now, Dagelet. Joseph scowled as Lapérouse wiped the blade against his sleeve, washing the blood away. The cold Commodore crouched down to pry the torch from the dead man's hands, and by some miracle the flame was still alight. Then, in his typical brash manner, he strode towards the cave opening without a second thought, and Joseph's only option was to follow his deadly friend into the dark unknown. Initially, it had seemed like the torchlight was illuminating the passage, yet when they eventually reached the central cavern, they discovered a new source of light. A small lagoon in the heart of the cave appeared to be emitting a soft turquoise glow, and Lapérouse gazed at the glittering water longingly. But Joseph couldn't share his exhilaration, for he had identified the light source. Across the cave ceiling, little luminous dots wriggled around like tiny stars, casting a shimmer on the world below. Glowworms they were. Joseph had never seen them before, but he'd read about them in the works of Carl Linnaeus. Yet despite the beauty of their radiant surroundings, something felt off. Joseph had imagined the Fountain of Youth to look different. This is it, Lapérouse whispered excitedly. Joseph Dagelet might have warmed to the discovery if not for the eerie petroglyphs on the walls. His narrow blue eyes slowly drifted across the bizarre stone-carved faces. They were staring right back at him, and some seemed to smile. Lapérouse hadn't noticed the carvings, for he'd already dashed his tricorn to the side and skipped towards the water's edge, the black sand quaking under his heavy steps. Joseph's clammy forehead creased into a frown. Lapérouse, wait. The naval officer gave him a smug smile. Fear not, Dagelet, he said. Louis XVI will make us rich for the rest of our days, for the Fountain of Youth has been discovered by servants of the glorious kingdom of France. Still wearing his dark blue coat, the gold epaulettes glistening in the firelight, he stomped into the lustrous lagoon unashamedly. Joseph was soon beguiled by the mysterious milieu. A salty smell clung to his nostrils like wood smoke, and an invisible wind brushed the small blonde hairs behind his neck. Impossible, he thought. There could be no breeze in the stone chamber. An hour's descent attested to that. At least 400 meters of rocky pathways and narrow tunnels separated the explorers from the entrance. They'd passed some dazzling sea blue gemstones on the way, convincing them they were on the right path, but they were too pale and crystal-like to be lapis lazuli, or stone of the heavens, as some called it. The light blue rocks in the cave seemed rarer. They were the color of the Caribbean Ocean, and their sheen was as stunning as the twinkling bugs on the ceiling, burning a bright cyan. Yet, the cave's beauty couldn't distract Joseph from the uncanny ambience in the air. Lapérouse was far into the lagoon now, the water at waist height. When he noticed the vivid bugs above, he laughed in wonder, each guffaw ringing loudly across the cavern. The glyphs were laughing with him, it seemed. Joseph's oar was much quieter, and he fiddled with his pocket watch like he always did when he was nervous. The strange insects were a sight to behold, and as the lagoon gleamed against the larvae in their shiny webs, he watched them broodingly. Perhaps this truly was the Fountain of Youth. It was pretty enough. How do you feel? He asked. Invincible. Lapérouse splashed his palms onto the water, but his joyous cry gently faded into an echo. Then a quiet cough came. If only Robert could see this, Joseph murmured, gaping up at the glowworms. I've never seen such an ecological phenomenon. Robert would want us to take samples. He missed his fellow scientist. Once the expedition had left France, Robert de Lemanon's wild enthusiasm had kept the whole crew entertained with his silly jokes and dark humour. The smiling walls returned Joseph to himself. What were they smiling at? The stone-carved eyes followed him as he stepped towards the water. All the while, Lapérouse's wheezy breaths grew louder and louder. What's wrong? Joseph asked him, but he quickly found the answer. A light haze appeared to be rising from the ripples. Nothing, Lapérouse replied, after another cough. It's just steam, is all. He was trying to keep calm, but his coughs were worsening, hoarser by the second, scraping the inside of his throat. Steam? The word felt uncomfortable as it escaped Joseph's mouth. His friend was not a man to make inaccurate descriptions. It was too cold to be steam, and it was strange that Joseph hadn't realized the temperature until now. The air was bone-chilling, unlike the sweltering heat of the jungle above. He hadn't noticed the human remains either, but when he nearly tripped on a flattened skull poking up out of the sand, Joseph knew it was time to leave. Flat, like the stone heads of Easter Island, he thought. "Here, give me a hand," Lapérouse said drowsily, wading back towards the bank as he coughed on. "I want to get out." Joseph could see why he wanted to get out. Lapérouse was half shrouded in a cloud of smoke, not steam, and it was choking him. Joseph almost dashed into the water to aid his comrade, but instinct stopped him. His own throat had started to tickle. And then it came to him. It wasn't smoke, it was gas. He'd smelt the odour before. It was harsh and foul like rotting eggs or damp gunpowder. Could it be brimstone? "The kingdom," Lapérouse slurred, stumbling to shore, breathless and delirious. Impressive as it was, he'd escaped the water without help, leaving the dark smog behind him as it oozed over the rippling surface like a murky cloak. But as soon as his feet reached dry land, his knees buckled, and Lapérouse collapsed onto the dark ashy sand, right beside the flat skull. Joseph dove towards his friend and shook him hard. "Lapérouse!" It was useless. Lapérouse was out cold. Joseph swiftly wrapped a cloth around his own airways, but he had no time to cover the Commodore's mouth. As the toxic gas loomed closer, Joseph acted fast. He was already faint and lightheaded, but with his very last burst of energy, Joseph Dagelet summoned all his strength and began to haul the heavy officer back the way they came. The rest was a blur. Time became obscure and immeasurable, but a blinding flash soon seared his eyes. Light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps. Whether it was within or without his mind was a mystery. Yet oddly, he felt sure of one thing. Whatever they'd discovered in the cave was no magic fountain. Instead, the explorers had found a wellspring of hell.